Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing my experience with endometriosis and the medical debt that I accumulated from that. I'm going to start by providing some context to how I budgeted and my poor buying habits prior to being straddled with medical debt. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up very poor and I was living in a very small space with a lot of other people. So I became very accustomed to sharing with them, and anytime I didn't have something, I would just jump into their wardrobe and grab whatever I needed. But the same would happen with them. They would jump into my wardrobe and grab whatever they needed from me. And so there were so many times that I was short of basics, tank tops, socks, whatever. So I started to buy a lot of duplicates of basic items just so I had them in case somebody borrowed them. I convinced myself that because these were affordable items, I wasn't wasting money. It was okay to have lots of duplicates. And over time, this became a real issue for me. I had so many socks, so many underwear, so many tank tops, things that I didn't really need two of, or three of for that matter. This behavior really led to me hoarding a lot of cheap trash, things that I didn't need, and I really wasn't investing in a lot of nice things that would last a long time. And I told myself that because I was buying things that didn't cost a lot of money, I wouldn't be impacting my future wealth or anything like that. So I felt like, okay, I'm not doing anything that bad. I was collecting a lot of tchotchkes and a lot of useless things. I had so many things that didn't match other things. I would buy a lot of clothing items that I thought, oh, this is cute and it's cheap, so I could just buy this. And if I didn't have anything match, I would just buy more cheap things that also didn't match anything else in my wardrobe. So I ended up with so many things that I didn't really need, things that took a lot of space, and I was wasting a lot of money without even realizing it. During the same time that I was developing all of these bad spending habits, I was also very ill and I wasn't even aware of it. In high school, I would have these really debilitating cramps, and I didn't know what they were. And I would tell people, and a lot of times people would tell me, it's nothing, you're being overdramatic, it's just your period, we all get this, it's not abnormal, you're fine. It was so bad to the point that during my English regent, I had to step out in the middle of writing an essay and go to the bathroom, and I was in so much pain that I was literally laying on the floor. A teacher found me and sent me home. I wasn't able to redo that essay, and so I lost a lot of points off of my English regents at high school. And nobody ever questioned that in my life. Everyone's like, that's completely normal. That's okay. I had so many other experiences that were similar to that where I was in so much pain for so long, and everyone would just say, take a Tylenol, take a Motrin, take a Midol. It's fine. Lay down. You're fine. As I got older, the pain persisted and it even got worse. And I would have to call out of work. Any job I ever had, I was constantly calling out sick. I was always feeling terrible. I would have such mind-numbing pain that I could barely walk or think or do anything when I was experiencing that kind of pain. A lot of the time, if I told my female bosses that I was experiencing pain, they would just tell me I was being overdramatic, and they were saying, hey, we all experience pain, you're no different, your pain isn't different, your pain isn't special. I found that a lot of times men wouldn't question it. They'd be like, okay, just go home, take the day off, it's not a big deal. But a lot of time, other women would be the ones that would tear me down, which really hurt even more. One day, 6 years ago, I went to visit my little sister upstate in New Paltz, where she was going to college at the time. And we were partying, we had a great time, and we were drinking and eating a bunch of garbage. The next day, I was in excruciating pain. I could barely breathe, I could barely move, and I was experiencing a really bad fever. I was writhing in pain. I was having such a bad fever that I was passing out several times, and the excruciating pain lasted about 12 hours before my sister called us a cab and we drove to the hospital out in Poughkeepsie. Now, I didn't have insurance at the time. I was at a new job and I was days away from finishing up my probationary period at my job, which would mean that I was just a few days away from having full medical benefits. But my sister insisted that I was not doing well and that I needed to go to the hospital. And she was right. So we went to the hospital, we did some scans and realized that I had a cyst. They had no idea what kind of cyst it was, but they said that it was fairly large at about 5 centimeters at the time. And they wanted me to go on a bunch of antibiotics, and they wanted to see if it would go down and do some more tests later on. Luckily, after this point, my medical benefits did kick in, and so the other tests were covered, and I did have to do a surgery because the cyst did grow to just above 7 centimeters, and I was scheduled for surgery, and I had an amazing surgery. I had an amazing surgeon, and I was very lucky, and I haven't had a cyst that big since. I haven't had anything quite like that since that moment. However, about a month later, I started getting all of the bills. They started accumulating, and I was collecting them, wondering, how could it all cost this much? I was in the hospital for one night, and it wasn't even a full night because I'd gone in at about 4 in the morning. So really, I was only in for a few hours. But because I was admitted to the hospital, I had to pay what a full day rate would cost, which I didn't know at the time, but it was capped at $5,500. I learned afterward that before Obamacare, there was no cap on hospital stays, but afterward, the cap was $5,500. To me, $5,500 seemed like an insane amount of money to pay for one night at a hospital. But that wasn't even the least of it. I started getting other bills, the bills from the anesthesiologist when I got my tests done when I was at the hospital, bills from the different doctors at work coming in to ask me questions, bills for every single test that I had to take. After I'd accumulated all my bills, I realized the total cost of my stay for that one day with all the tests and being admitted was $13,000. I was 24 years old, and nothing like this had happened to me up until that point, so I didn't know that I could negotiate down medical bills. Nobody else that I'd been speaking to was aware of it either, and so I just thought, okay, I have to pay this, and I figured out a way to budget it. Now, it took me 2 years to pay that off, and I'm going to say please take that with a grain of salt, because I was very privileged to have the luxury of moving back in with my parents at the time. I was 24 years old, and I had no idea how I was going to be paying back that money, and I was in full-blown panic. So I moved back in with my parents, and my costs were lowered very drastically. I was very grateful to them, but I understand that that's not the case for most people. However, even with my costs being lowered that drastically, I still had other costs. I had to learn how to budget, and the first thing that I had to do when I had to learn how to budget was stop buying little tchotchkes and stop buying duplicates of everything that I owned. I cut back on buying things that I didn't need, and I started to think of everything that I bought as an investment in myself. I even traveled during this time, and I'm glad that I did, because when you're in medical debt or any kind of debt, you think that you can't spend money on yourself or be happy, and it can be very overwhelming. But the one thing that I noticed is you should invest in yourself during this time, and you should have things that you look forward to. Even if you don't travel or buy a lot of things often, you should still have something to look forward to. I did still feel guilt every time I went and bought myself anything. I still felt guilt every time I even bought a cup of coffee. The one thing I learned during this experience is that there's a lot of things that come up in life, things that you can't plan for, and things that you're not going to be ready for when they happen. However, you do have to take them step by step. The first thing I learned with medical debt is don't look at the entire amount. Find out how much you're able to pay off right then and there, pay that off, and then call every single person and find out if you can break down the bill into smaller amounts and pay off, whether it's monthly, weekly, however you can pay, so that you can view it as smaller chunks. $13,000 was a lot of money to me back then. And if I had thought about that amount constantly, it would have been too much for me to handle. But when I broke it down into smaller chunks, say $600 one month, $1,000 when I had it, or $200 if I was experiencing a really bad month. And by paying in those small increments, I was able to handle it over time. I understand that if I didn't live with my parents, I would be paying off that debt much longer. However, I did budget my debt when I was living on my own, and I knew that it was going to take me somewhere to about 5 years to pay that off. And I know that that seems like a daunting amount of time, but I know a lot of people that are paying off much bigger debts, and they pay it off in a much shorter or longer amount of time. At the end of the day, it's really whatever you can handle. The most important thing that I learned was I should have been prepared and I should have had insurance from the beginning. And I also should have trusted my gut instinct when I knew that I was in pain and I was experiencing health issues that I knew weren't normal. I let a lot of people manipulate me and tell me that I was being overdramatic because they didn't really know how to handle the situation. They didn't know how to help me. And so they thought if they told me to just lay down and breathe, that it would all just go away. But the truth is, health issues don't just go away magically. There's no miracle for endometriosis. I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. It is a chronic issue, and I do have to deal with it. And when I'm experiencing so much pain that I can't even breathe, that means I have to go seek medical help. After talking to a lot of my friends and relatives about the medical issues that I faced, I realized that this was very common. So many people were experiencing this, but didn't speak about this openly. It wasn't until I told other people about my experience that I heard about theirs. That's why I'm sharing this with you today, because if you're experiencing something like this, please go seek medical professional help. Please seek the medical help that you need now. Because if you think that by waiting you're going to be saving money, you won't be. If you wait until it's too late and you need emergency surgery, it'll only cost you more then. Another big takeaway that I had was that I was catastrophizing my debt and my health issues. Every single time something would happen after the fact, I was so worried that it was going to be just as bad and just as drastic afterward. I'm normally a very anxious person, and so this only further exacerbated my anxiety. However, I've learned a lot of different lessons from paying off my medical debt and dealing with my health issues. Self-care isn't only just about fun. Self-care is about taking care of your body and your mind. It's important that you take care of yourself and you listen to your body when you're experiencing issues, because ignoring them doesn't make them go away, and it only makes them worse. I hope this video was helpful to you. Please let me know if you had a very similar experience. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences in the comments below. Please like and subscribe.